Thanks for joining me here at NTD Business. I'm Don Ma. Today's Juneteenth. Forest markets are closed. But over the weekend, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Beijing. It was to try to stabilize U.S. China relations. Though it seems there were no major breakthroughs. Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping did say there were progress, but it's unclear specifically what he's referring to. China refused Washington's bid to resume military-to-military communication channels and cited U.S. sanctions as the obstacle. The two sides appeared entrenched in their positions over everything from Taiwan to trade, including U.S. actions toward China's chip industry, human rights, and Russia's war against Ukraine. This is one of the most significant U.S.-China exchanges since President Joe Biden took office. It was not clear how they would overcome their differences, but they agreed to continue their diplomatic engagements with more visits in the coming weeks and months. Now, this is just an overview. For a more in-depth analysis, head on over to NTD's China in Focus program. Meanwhile, a Twitter video app for smart TVs is apparently in the company's plans. This is according to owner Elon Musk. He tweeted this on Saturday. This is a move that would be in line with the company's new plans to focus on growing video content on the platform. Musk, in response to a tweet, suggested that a Twitter video app is needed. Musk replied, "It's coming." New Twitter CEO Linda Yaccarino and Musk, in an investor presentation, laid out Twitter's plans to focus on video, creator, and commerce partnerships to revitalize the social media company's business beyond digital advertising. This new animated movie, Elemental, had the second lowest debut in the history of the studio at the box office. The new movie also features Pixar's first non-binary character. The movie took in roughly $30 million at the U.S. and Canadian box offices over the weekend. Elemental reportedly cost $200 million to make and another $100 million to market, according to Variety. The studio is looking to rebound from the box office disappointment of its 2022 release of the movie Lightyear, which is the origin story of Toy Story hero Buzz Lightyear. Controversy surrounded that movie for a same-gender kissing scene. And finally, how do you feel about remote work? Do you think people are more or less productive working at home? A recent survey found that 1 in 7 Americans admit they only work for about 3 to 4 hours on average each day when working remotely. The survey is by upgradedpoints.com. It talked to over 1,000 Americans who are remote workers. It found that 55% of men feel that remote work is better for productivity, so just a little more than half. Meanwhile, 62% of women feel the same way. The survey also found that nearly 3 out of 4 remote workers are scrolling through social media during their workday, and more than a third are shopping. The survey found that 1 in 5 Americans say they have taken a nap while on the clock remotely. So to shed some light on whether remote work is good for productivity or not, joining me is Ira Wolf. He's recognized as one of the top 5 global thought leaders on future of work and HR. So a recent survey says 1 in 7 Americans admit they only work for about 3 to 4 hours on average each day when working remotely. Now, this is significant because if you're on a team working on a project and one of your teammates aren't pulling the weight, it could delay the whole project. It could make the product of less quality. I mean, when surveys like these come out, I can imagine why company leaders want employees back in the office. You've had a lot of exposure in this area. You've talked a lot about this. So I want to ask you, what's the core problem here?
I could sum it up in 2 words or maybe 4 words. Two is productivity paranoia, and the other may be hybrid hysteria. There was a study done last year by Microsoft, and they found that 85% of leaders said that the shift to hybrid work or remote work has made it more challenging to have confidence that their employees are actually being productive. So when studies like this come out, it resonates. Leaders and managers and other people jump all over it. But the challenge is, and I wrote about this 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, and we used to call it presenteeism. It means people showed up for work, but they actually didn't, they weren't doing what the managers thought they were doing. So in 2005, U.S. workers were declared to be wasting 2 hours a day surfing the internet, hanging around the water cooler, spending times in meetings, looking for other jobs, shopping online. That was 20 years ago that was happening. I know the study that you were referencing also talked about younger people were wasting more time. Well, it's interesting because in that same study 20 years ago, they found that employees that were born between 1970 and 1979, which are basically Gen X, were wasting almost 2 hours a day at work, and the millennials were wasting a little bit more than that. That was 20 years ago. So some of these things are just great headline grabbing, attention grabbers. But the reality is that there is some truth. I'm sure there are people that are wasting their time. But one of the challenges that we had was with one of the stats was with tracking the mouse, that people would just go in and move their mouse around to say, hey, I'm working. The problem with that is that we need to really find another way to measure productivity rather than just people being busy or sitting at a desk or typing on their keyboard. The reality is these are micromanagement ways that executives are trying to say, hey, we need to need to see that our people are working. But it's based on time, because there was a new study that just came out. There's actually a few studies that came out. One of them was from University of Chicago. The other one's from Stanford University. And they found that hybrid and remote workers are actually 9% more productive. Now, that means that for maybe in a lesser amount of time, maybe only half the day, they're getting 9% more work done. Same thing with Stanford. Some of the studies are coming out that are ridiculous, which you also have to question, that they're saying that they're 79% more productive working at home. So we're on a journey. We really need to study this more. We need to have more studies like this coming out. It also depends on the industry. There are certain industries, financial industries, a lot of the knowledge industries. It also has to do with the types of jobs that are being done. It has to do with the education levels. Who are the people that are actually wasting the most time? So we need a lot more work on this, but the study, is probably accurate. There's probably people wasting times, and yes, they could be managed better. But this isn't something new. And it also means that we need to, part of it is leaders just lost the confidence of, hey, I don't know what my employees are doing, so we need to have them back in the office. And that's just not going to work.
Let me ask you this question. For some people, work is not really enjoyable. They wouldn't say they're having fun when they're working. But when they're at home, they're more comfortable, right? So for some, there's a conflict there between comfort and working. There's a very big difference for some. Wouldn't there be a conflict when they're working from home to actually, doing their work?
Well, it also comes down to, and that's a great point. It also comes down to employee well-being. We are, certainly have labor shortages these days. Companies can't find enough people. It looks like our economy is not going to go into recession, or maybe it's going to be a really soft landing. And the future doesn't look very good for our labor pool. So we're also going to have to employers are going to have to take a fresh look, is that if they are even if they have the same level of productivity, but the employee stays on the payroll, that they are engaged. Gallup just came out with the report about 2 weeks ago, and they identified that, again, almost 7 or more than 7 out of every 10 employees are disengaged at work. 1 out of 5 are miserable. They're not very productive. If you're not engaged and you're feeling miserable, then you're not giving 100% of your time. So yes, I believe that there is a sense of people are comfortable, but if they're in the office and they're worried about their kids, they're challenged by caregiving. It may be, about their parents. And I just personally went through a situation like that, where my mother was in Florida and we had to take a number of trips. Now, I own my own company. and I've worked from home for 20 years. But the reality is, if I was an employee, what would I do? My attention would not be focused on work, but it would be focused on my family. So there is some value of being home. But as I shared with that study from 20 years ago, and there's some studies even older than that. I'm old and I'm an older baby boomer, so I remember lots of study being done around how much time was wasted around the water cooler. You know what we talk about now is like, oh, we lost all that water cooler time. If people were coming to work, that's where a lot of ideas were generated. That's where a lot of conversations were generated. But 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, all the bosses complained about all the people hanging around the water cooler, and I'm paying you to work, not hang around the water cooler.
I mean, that's a good point. Maybe perhaps it's not about whether working from home or at the office. It's about the individual. Are they a productive person? Maybe you can just comment on that.
Oh, absolutely. We're living in a personalized world. Everything's personalized. We go on the internet and they know all our activity. Everybody works differently. What is it that that person needs? Because there are people, by the way, there's a lot of employees that want to come back to the office. They are more organized. Maybe they don't have an office space. Maybe they don't have the internet space. Maybe they're living with roommates, or there's just too many, they have young children at home, and there's too many distractions. So there are people who want to come back to the office, but there's other people that it's much more difficult. They're very talented. They have the skills that employers need, but the employers want to treat everybody as an all or none, which is also interesting because every exec CEO who has declared that we're mandating everybody to come back to the office. Nobody's actually implemented that full time. It's always, well, you have to be here 3 days or 2 days a week. And then a lot of companies have reversed that as well. So it's going to be, we're on a journey, but as you said, it needs to be much more personalized. And employers need to, sit down and ask their employees what they need. Also, just one other comment. We talk a lot about hybrid, remote, and return to the office. The number one thing that employees want is flexibility. It's not that they don't want to be forced. They're willing to come back to the office if there's a reason to come back to the office. If they're just coming back to the office, and I've seen this happen, is that everybody's on a Zoom call in the office with their customers or with people who couldn't get to work, which is just ridiculous. And therefore, that's a waste of time as well. So companies just have to really kind of create a blank slate, look at what's going to work, what do their employees want, where are the employees that they need, and again, going back to having different metrics, measuring outcomes, not hours worked.
And just one more quick question. I've heard this argument when leaders want to give somebody a promotion, are they going to give it to somebody in person, or are they going to give it to somebody they only see on a screen?
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. They're going to give it to people that are in person, but that goes back to 85% of leaders only have confidence in people that are present, that they can see working. But that also goes back to what I had said earlier about the outcomes. We need to measure outcomes. We need to measure what needs to be done and where it's done. It may have to be done in the office, but there's a lot of very, very productive people that are not coming to the office 5 days a week, 40 hours a week.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so much today, Ira. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.